Hi, everybody. Welcome to Data in Play. I'm Andrew from Ambition Group, and this is the mini-series that gives you an insight into how data is harnessed by some of the world's biggest sports teams and brands. Joining me today is Jon Hay, who is the Senior Vice President for Data Intelligence and Analytics for the world-famous Boston Red Sox. Jon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad we're world famous. It's always funny. Baseball is very popular in a very small number of countries. So as compared to some other sports out there. So I appreciate it.
No, you're more than welcome. Everyone's heard of the Boston Red Sox, everybody. So I'm super pleased and excited to have you on today. And just to give the audience home a little bit of context, so we'll be looking at still a focus on data analytics in the context really of the kind of the commercial side of the sport and kind of how you guys do things and how you really harness data to be able to do what you do, right? So if we just get straight into it, Jon, so let's set the scene. So what does the SVP for data analytics do for Boston Red Sox in a bit of a whirlwind nutshell?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I sit on Zoom meetings, I guess is the short answer. But I always joke I got my job because I was very analytical. I was the guy building predictive models and working with data and doing R and SQL and Python and those things. And now I have a bunch of really smart people on my team who do those things. And mostly I manage up, manage down, manage laterally, and things like that. But I think the real answer to your question is, I think the fun thing about being in sort of the world of data analytics now is you sort of touch everything. So at the Red Sox in particular, and I can speak about Family Sports Group as well, which is kind of our parent company, but at the Red Sox, we sort of have our baseball arm is somewhat independent. So we have sort of a whole baseball ops, or we have baseball analytics people, like that's all sort of one sort of structure, but kind of the rest of the business, which is, sales, marketing, ticketing, operations, finance, HR, all those things, our foundation, which is our charitable arm, that's kind of all under our purview. We don't have a sort of analytics person on those teams. We have a centralized team that kind of supports those. So for me, that means I get to get involved in a little bit of everything. I work on our dynamic ticket pricing at Fenway. I work on, new ventures that we're pursuing. We just built a 5,000 seat music hall in the back of Fenway Park last year that we opened, the MGM Music Hall. I get to work on special events like the Fenway Bowl. We have a college football bowl. We do concerts and partnerships with Live Nation. It's a little bit everything, but I think it's always a fun place to be. And I've been here for almost 10 years now. And probably if it were the same thing every day, I would probably not still be here after 10 years. So
yeah, it sounds like you have your hands full with all that sort of stuff. And it must be really cool to, like I said, work for one of the biggest teams in the world. So are you a Red Sox fan then yourself then? Or
I did. I grew up here, which is convenience. I always say you don't have to be a fan of the team that you work for, but it makes it a lot easier because sports famously underpays for these sorts of roles, and it's helpful if you have a real passion for the sort of what's on the field. And for me, so I joined in 2013. The Red Sox won the World Series in 2013 and 2018, and so that was being a part of that is like you can't put a dollar value on all that, and having have World Series rings and all those sorts of things. And so that's been really wonderful. And my family's still local, so it's nice to be able to I took my young kids to opening day this year, and I've taken my parents to playoff games and stuff. So it's nice to be able to share that with the people in your life.
yeah, it must give an extra little bit of satisfaction as well, I guess, when sort of the work that you do behind the scenes is going to help the team that you love and support as well in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's I always say I was on a panel yesterday and people said, what's your dream job? And I said, well, 20 years ago it was probably playing right field for the Red Sox. And 10 years ago, I realized I couldn't do that. So it's probably being the general manager of the Red Sox. And I realized I couldn't do that. So it's like, now my dream job is this, because I still get to help out. I'm helping the engine that kind of gets us the money for the payroll to drive the on-field product. And I think that's, like you said, being a part of that. And I think it's one of the cool things about working in sports is, you really do get this feeling of sort of, we're all working towards the same goal. It doesn't matter if you're on the mound or working in an accounts receivable, you're still sort of trying to help, kind of the engine move forward. And so there's a real immense set of satisfaction and partnership when these things do work out and you get to, hop on a chartered plane with your entire front office to fly to Los Angeles for the World Series because, you're all doing this kind of together. So I really enjoy that. I love my coworkers. I really do. I always say we have a no asshole policy, if I'm allowed to say things like that on this podcast. It's just a wonderful group of people and a lot of folks, like I said, I've been there for 9 years, but many other people have been there for 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years, because it's that sort of place that, when you get there and you're trying to build something, people don't want to leave.
Yeah, it really does sound like a big kind of family institution in a lot of ways. And I know that's a big thing for you guys, especially over in the States compared to elsewhere in Europe and stuff like that. But it sounds great. It sounds like you have a bit of a dream job there, which sounds amazing. And some of the stuff that you do there, and we touched upon it kind of a little bit before, and it's kind of my next question to you, really. So in terms of sort of the commercial side of it, the revenue side of it, so why, in your opinion, is it important for sports clubs to diversify the different streams of revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I think look no further than the global pandemic, right? We were in a situation a couple of years ago, we meaning Fenway Sports Group, so our parent organization owns, the Red Sox in Fenway Park, and we also own Liverpool Football Club, in the UK. We own the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL over here. We own Nesson, which is our local RSM. We own 80% of that. So that's a lot of great different businesses. They all really rely on live sports, and specifically live sports with fans. And so we sort of went in a situation where suddenly all of our different revenue streams were pretty much halted. And that was pretty scary. And I think what you're seeing, especially in the US, I can't speak as much for overseas, but you're really seeing a move towards these sort of like almost ballpark villages. So, they've done a really good job down in Atlanta here with the new park there. Chicago's done it around Wrigley, but really a sense of like, a real estate development project where, the ballpark or the arena is this sort of anchor tenant in the middle, but, you've got hotels, you've got retail, you've got restaurants, you've got bowling alleys, movie theaters, concert halls, all these sorts of things. And so I think we're starting to really, we own a lot of the real estate around Fenway Park. And I think we're starting to think about that as well. So, and by the way, like, the teams are bad sometimes. So, if the team goes out there and doesn't perform, people don't want to come. It's nice to say, well, maybe you don't want to see a Red Sox game, but guess what? We've got, James Taylor playing tomorrow night at our brand new music hall, which is on the back of Fenway Park. Guess what? If you're coming out of town, we've got the hotel, we've got the restaurant, all those sorts of things. So I think that's where we've been kind of thinking about that vision of how do you protect against some of that stuff. And I think still being in that sort of like entertainment space, because I do think that's our core sort of function, but finding ways that you connect with people that, again, might not be even sports fans. There's nothing wrong with not being a sports fan, but we want to make sure that we have a product that we can deliver to anyone. So at Fenway Park every year, we do a lot of baseball, but we do, 12 to 14, live concerts. We do college football most years. We do ice hockey most years. We just had the Bruins and Penguins play the Winter Classic this year. We do like a top golf event usually. So one of those things where you literally set up bays and people hit golf balls onto the field, onto targets and stuff. We do Spartan races. So people running around and climbing ropes up the Green Monster and all sorts of, it's like you got this incredible jewel in the center of the city. How do you, when ownership bought the team, 20 years ago now, it was like, hey, we have 81 games a year. Well, what are you doing the other 284 days or whatever the math works out to? And so now we have a really thriving events team as well that books, we do local graduations now. So Northeastern College has their graduation here in a couple of weeks. We do weddings, all those sorts of things. It's like, hey, you've got this asset. How do you find ways? And so it goes back to diversification, right? So like, how do we make sure that we are, having different revenue streams and ways that we can connect with people that are not relying on 25 people playing baseball well, which, can ebb and flow, based on injuries and luck and things like that. So.
Yeah, I think it's really an important point you make there in terms of being able to diversify because, I mean, you're the expert this obviously, but over the last kind of 25, 30 years or so, I imagine a lot of teams will just rely on sort of ticket sales and merchandise sales of kind of the jerseys or the shirts with their favorite players in the back, or all that sort of stuff they can buy in the club shops, right? So I mean, over the last kind of 25, 30 years, how have sports teams kind of evolved from that to kind of move away from just the tickets and the merchandise over to do different things? Is it more about what you say in terms of really utilizing the extra time that you've got and the resource that you've got to try and find different things to be able to entice and attract people to Fenway, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. Baseball, among sports in the world, is probably one of the most reliant on physical people being in the physical stadium, right? We have 81 home games a year, and we have a 38,000 seat stadium. So in a good year, we sell 3 million tickets. That's more than the local football, basketball, and hockey teams combined, right? It's just a nature of it. It's just a math problem, basically. So I think we, meaning the Red Sox and baseball, have been very guilty of really feel like we live within 50 miles of Fenway Park. How do we get you here? And I think what we are learning, and what other sports have learned probably more than us, and this is where I think it's helpful for us, owning Liverpool and being able to work with them. I think what European football does better than anyone is understand the value of a global brand, right? So, you see Man U building these fan centers over in China now. Most of those people will never actually go to Old Trafford, right? Like they're, but they still are going to be fans. They're going to buy merchandise, to your point. And by the way, when we're putting together sponsorship decks, you think about Standard Chartered for us as a kit sponsorship. Well, that's a really, yeah, that's Hong Kong, that's Singapore, that's Asia, like that's where that's a big, and so be able to sort of market your global audience to those sorts of partners is really big. So we have sponsorship deals now where we have assets with, you know, with Liverpool, with the Red Sox, with the Penguins. We own RFK Racing and NASCAR. You know, being able to sort of cross pollinate those and say we have this global brand that we can kind of sell. So I think to answer your question, I think where we've started to really do more with our customer data is saying it's not just whether you come to Fenway Park or not. That's great. Please come. We'd love to see you. Come on in. But, you know, you can be a Red Sox fan who lives in, you know, Tokyo, Japan, and you can still engage with us in a lot of ways, right? You can stream our games, you can follow our emails, you can buy our merchandise, and it's going to help us when we're talking about broadcasting deals, you know, sort of global broadcasting deals, things like that. And that's where I think a lot of, you know, especially in sports like the NFL over here, so much of the revenue is really a sponsorship media play, right? I mean, it's great that you can sell a stadium out, but, you know, the NFL has 8 home games a year. You know, you're just not going to be able to make the money back there. It's really about how do you, and for us, you know, we're now doing, we actually just signed a deal to do a sleeve sponsorship. So it's funny, again, over in the UK, like I remember the first time my wife saw a Liverpool game, she said, "Which one are we?" And I'm like, "Oh, we're that one." She goes, "That says Standard Chartered." I'm like, "Yeah, it's funny. That's how they all are. It's normal over there, and over here, it's, you know, it's blasphemy that you would put any sort of branding onto the kits or the jerseys." So we signed a deal with MassMutual, you know, great partnership for $175 million over 10 years to put a MassMutual logo and with a bunch of other assets as well. And a lot of that pitch was, here's how, you know, it's not just people in Fenway Park. Here's how your brand's going to activate across our entire global, you know, sort of fan base. And so I think that's where I think the ability to kind of take that customer data that's not just about butts and seats and convert it into, you know, media, corporate partnership, things like that. That's something we've really, I think, evolved in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think you've done a fantastic job doing that as well, because you've been able to find so many different kind of areas for the team and for the group as a whole to kind of branch out and really diversify those streams. And you mentioned it just at the end there in terms of the data. So where does the data kind of come into it then? So how have you been utilizing data to support this kind of revenue diversity amongst kind of the Red Sox and the group, etc.?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for us is, you know, we were in a situation not that long ago where we had an immense amount of, especially customer data, but, you know, we didn't really have a great data warehouse structure, didn't really have an ETL process, didn't have an MDM system, you know, really weren't deduping, there were no golden records, we didn't have a great, you know, interaction with our CRM system. So I think we've spent a lot of time over the last sort of 5 to 6 years. You know, we moved to the cloud, so we have a partnership with Google, as MLB does. So we're GCP, we're BigQuery for all of our customer data. We utilize Salesforce for our CRM system, and there's a pipeline there. So, you know, the long story short is, you know, when I joined the Red Sox, Jon Hay, was in our data environment 116 times, and now I'm in there once, right, with one actual system, which includes all the ways I interact with our different brands and sort of, you know, team avidity scores, you know, recency, frequency, monetary, all those sorts of things. So I think that has really helped us understand who our fans are. And you know, the way that really manifests itself is, you know, we used to have this sort of what we call a shotgun approach, right? Send an email to 1 million people with the same message and just sort of see what happens, blast it out there and sort of hope for the best. Now, I think what we're trying to do is get really hyper targeted to say, hey, look, we're going to sell, you know, Andrew, like we're going to send him a message personally with a customer journey because we think that he, you know, is a fan of XYZ. And by the way, it may be that you're a fan of one of our, you know, corporate partners, right? So we, you know, Wasabi, you know, hot cold storage is a big partner of ours. Maybe you don't even care about sports, but we think that you might be, you know, you're a CTO at a company that may be thinking about this sort of stuff. Can we sort of activate you in a way that sort of supports our partners as well and kind of helps that story? So I think the big thing for us was really kind of getting our data. You know, sports is interesting in that the example I always give when I like lecture at colleges and stuff is, you know, I show a slide which has, I call it my ketchup slide. So it's like if you're Heinz ketchup, you don't really know who likes Heinz ketchup, right? Like if someone like buys Heinz ketchup online, right? Maybe like an Instacart or like an online shopping, you might know who they are. Maybe they follow you on social media if they really love ketchup. But for the most part, you just don't really know who your fans are, right? Whereas like that's not a problem in sports. We know who our fans are. That's not the issue. The issue is how do you take these millions of people that are raising their hand and saying, I'm a Red Sox fan, I wear the hat, you know, I'll do anything for you guys. How do you make sure that you're sort of delivering the right messaging then? Because I think in 2023, I always have to look at the calendar and remind myself what year it is. People don't mind being marketed to. People don't mind personalization, but it has to be personalized, right? Like they don't mind that you're in their face, but it has to be something that resonates with them. And so if someone's sending you a push notification about, you know, a seniors offer and you're, you know, in your 20s, you're like, what the heck is this? Like, you don't know who I am at all. And so I think that we've been trying to really use that customer environment to sort of get to this point of having real conversations with our fans and AI is a part of that. We're starting to use some customer sort of AI around the sales and marketing process. Can you sort of qualify leads and have that conversation with AI and then kind of hand it off to your actual reps, based on the data that you sort of have. So I think that's been really cool to see. And I think that the reaction from fans has been mostly positive. I think people get it, right? It's like you go to Bed Bath & Beyond right now and you're going to be chased by shower curtain ads for the next year of your life. It's the way the world works. If you don't like it, stay off the internet. So it's really about how do you make sure that's a message that kind of resonates with people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of, it's got to be personalized, and you can't just send one message to a bunch of people and hope it kind of resonates with them. And we find that a lot from a kind of a recruitment standpoint over in the kind of in what we do in terms of data analytics. And a message that goes to one person will speak to them, but it might not speak to another person. So everything's got to be personalized, and it's got to have meaning behind it. And you've got to do things for the right reason as well. And that's exactly what you're talking about before, in terms of, you can't just send out a bunch of messages to people and hope it kind of lands somewhere, right? You really got to make it personal to them and really attract them back to you guys, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you made that last point, which is great. It's not just though, it's not one-offs, right? It's a journey. It's all about the customer journey. And we talk a lot about, we have a Kid Nation program that provides free tickets to kids under 14 with a paying adult. We have a Student Nines program where high school and college students can buy $9 tickets. We have these like ballpark passes that are more focused on early 20s people that, you buy a pass for the whole month of April and you can go whenever you want, but it's standing room. And the theory there is you're building this customer journey, right? You're finding young people, you're getting them in the ballpark. You're then bringing them in as cheap tickets when they don't have a lot of income. You're creating a flexible product. And then the theory is when you're my age and you've got kids, you're bringing them to Fenway Park and you're kind of creating that new generation of fans. So I do think it's about personalization, absolutely. But I think the last point you made is really salient, which is it needs to be a conversation and it needs to be sort of both ways. So when people respond and say, hey, this doesn't resonate with me, or this is not the right product for me, like making sure you're taking that into your environment and sort of updating based on that. So yeah, I think it's a work in progress, and we certainly have work to do there, but I think it's exciting to like have the tools in place and kind of have our data in a place where we can actually do this stuff, build customer segmentations and profiles and things like that. And now it's a matter of like, you kind of built the car. How do you, where are you driving it? Kind of what that sort of thing. So it's exciting, but also, can be, bandwidth wise can be a challenge. I think we always struggle with headcount and just having people to kind of oversee these things. And so automation is also the name of the game. The more that we can, we've got 11 million customers in our database, and our sales team is not appropriately sized to call 11 million people. So that kind of goes back to AI and customer journey. Like, can you build these things out in CRM? We use a tool called Outreach in CRM. And you put someone in a journey. And so it's a combination of text message, phone calls, email, paid ads. And based on how they interact with stuff, they're getting filtered across different sort of pathways. And so eventually someone gets to a point where they've been qualified, validated for a certain product. Now they're getting a phone call which says, hey, we know XYZ about you. We know you might want this product specifically, and not having this 15 call back and forth to try and get to that point where you kind of know what makes someone tick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I imagine it probably is one of the biggest challenges that you face, right, in terms of coming up with these new inventive ways and making sure everything is it's personalized and it's resonating with a certain type of person or a certain demographic that you're aiming for, right? But I imagine over the last sort of 9-10 years that you've been with the Red Sox now, you've seen some kind of huge data challenges over the time there. So what have you found to be some of the biggest data challenges come across since you started?
Yeah, I mean, probably our biggest one has really been, it's sort of remarkable. This has gotten a lot better, but I'll tell you, so 3 or 4 years ago, we would have 38,000 people in Fenway Park for a game. We might only know 5,000 or 6,000 of them, right? So if you bought 8 tickets yourself, we have your data. We don't have the data of the 7 people that you brought with you. And by the way, you may have handled it. We don't even know if you really went, right? You may have handed off the tickets. And at the time, we still allowed physical tickets. We allowed printed PDFs. So things were changing hands. There was we didn't have that closed ecosystem, right? We weren't tracking rotating barcodes and things like that. And so, we'd go to a game and people would say, hey, what's the demographic breakdown? We'd say, we can tell you ticket buyers, but that's a pretty small sort of subset. People say, how many kids are in the ballpark? And it's like, I don't know, we can survey, surveys are better than nothing, but they're not great. We went through COVID, ended up going full digital, mostly as a public health measure, right? So not having people handing stuff back and forth. So that's helped a lot. We're closer to 50% now. You can still walk out with 4 tickets on your phone and scan all 4 kind of thing. So that's helped a lot. But I think our biggest challenge really has still been, we have 11 million people in our database. I mean, there's probably 40 million people that have been in Fenway Park. It's really like, how do we find other ways to sort of surface people? And that's where I think, this concept you and I chatted earlier about, this sort of entertainment village sort of concept, right? So you're seeing this a lot of sports in the US, especially in larger markets. For us, having Fenway Park as sort of the anchor tenant, but we own a lot of real estate around Fenway. We have a music hall. We operate the House of Blues to 2,500 and 5,000 seats respectively. If we build a bunch of hotels and restaurants and bowling alleys and movie theaters and all sorts of things, do you start creating an ecosystem where someone's showing up? And by the way, there's actually incentive to kind of raise your hand, because if you go have dinner down the street before the game and you're a ticket holder, you get 10% off or something like that, right? So you're sort of creating a bit of this kind of closed loop where there's a single source of truth, there's a single app, and I think that's where we've made a lot of strides, but I think there's still a big challenge there, just to sort of really understand who our fans are, and again, really in the interest of just sort of serving them. We're not trying to like dig people out of the ground and catch them doing something. We're just trying to say, hey, look, if you're a big Red Sox fan, I don't know who you are, that's wrong. Like, we should be able to. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with someone who was just saying, he's like, he's like, I'm from Buffalo. I'm a huge Buffalo Bills fan in the NFL. He's like, but I haven't lived there for 20 years. He's like, but every year I pick a city that the Bills are playing and I take my dad and we fly there. So we've been to New Orleans, we've been to Dallas, we do all this stuff, and we go to a game every year. And he's like, I don't think the Bills know who I am. I never see that. Like, well, he's like, I should be getting something every year that says, hey, Brian, we know that you go to a game every year. We know the team's in, whatever, Tampa Bay for the first time in years. Like, let's help you get down there with a destinations package. And he's like, they don't seem to know who I am. And that's not to knock on Buffalo, because they do a fantastic job. I know a lot of the team there. It's a challenge for all of us, right? Is how do we really, and in that situation, that's not even Buffalo's data, right? Like, the Dallas Cowboys would have to tell the Buffalo Bills that this person's kind of coming in. So I think that's where the leagues get involved as well. So for us, Major League Baseball, the NFL, NBA, like, that's where I think the leagues who can actually kind of see, between the leagues and the Ticketmaster, TDC sort of the world, right? That's where you kind of create that like full ecosystem of a fan avidity, right? Someone who may not live anywhere near Boston, but maybe a Red Sox fan. So I think that's definitely an opportunity for us, but something that we really, really still need to kind of unearth.
Yeah, but I think there's plenty there to kind of go, isn't it? It's going to be really interesting to see how it all sort of plays out over the next few years. And I, for one, will be keeping my eye on it, see how you guys do. But I'm sure it'll be a massive success. And it's interesting because of how important kind of the usage of data and the usage of analytics is so important to kind of the area in which you focus on, which you specialize in. But in terms of the future then, Jon, so what do you kind of envisage for the future as far as the usage of data and analytics and how that matures, I guess? So yeah, how do you envisage the future to be like?
Yeah, I mean, I always say there are things that professional sports teams do well, and there are a lot of things where we're very behind the times. I mean, it's great that we are. I mean, 10 years ago, we weren't even doing variable or dynamic pricing. Every the same ticket costs the same price for every game. I mean, airlines figured that out 45 years ago, and we were still at a point where we're like, yep, it doesn't matter if it's a Saturday in July against the Yankees or a Wednesday in April against the Pirates, like same price. So there are things that I think we're still playing catch up on, and so I think it's a great opportunity for us. Like we learn a lot from other sort of teams and leagues. But we also learned, I mentioned airlines, like JetBlue is a great partner of ours. They're the naming partner on our spring training facility. There's a lot that we can learn from pricing algorithms, optimization of sort of routes, right? The fact that planes, like stadiums, if a seat is empty, it's worthless to you. Putting someone in that seat has value, right? So what you really want to do is hyper segment your pricing. And by the way, some people aren't going to show up. So do you oversell the planes? Like, there's a lot of things there that are kind of analogs. And so I think we try and take a lot of those things that are other businesses and try and pull those in as much as we can. But I think in answer to this question, I think a couple things, we're really, I would say for us, we've done some machine learning stuff, especially around our ticket pricing models. We kind of got some cool stuff going there. There's a lot of opportunity still, I think, around the ML side, both because we have a lot of data and we get a lot of feedback, right? We can run audiences, we can build an audience, run a paid social campaign, see in pretty real time what's happening, be able to feed that information back in and sort of run through that kind of loop. So I think we're in a unique position in sports to have enough of an echo chamber to be able to sort of say, what's happening, kind of adjust in real time. So I think really expanding the use of ML, I think is a big effort for us, and especially around bandwidth. I mentioned, we're a pretty small team. All teams like mine in sports are pretty small. If you're trying to sell 3 million tickets and you have 11 million fans in your database, you really need to think about ways you can automate and streamline it and things like that. So I think that's a big part. And I think, look, we're all trying to figure out AI right now. I'm excited that we're doing some work now around sales and service. So we're kind of dipping our toe in the waters. I think that's going to be really interesting to see where it goes, because I do think, like even stuff like creative material, right? So we have a big team that's cranking out fantastic creative all the time for different campaigns and emails and things like that. Could some of that ultimately be AI generated, right? Could you sort of say, give me a photo of Rafi Devers, making the throw from third base against the Baltimore Orioles on a sunny day at Fenway Park? Like, there's some things like that I think we don't know yet, but it all comes back to sort of bandwidth and people having time to do stuff. So can you automate some of the more basic sort of job roles and let people be more strategic and high level about what they do? So I think those are both cool opportunities. And then two other things in our space in particular that I think we're thinking a lot about. One is sports gambling. Again, very funny probably to you being in the UK, where I went to a match at Anfield a couple months ago, and you can like bet in the stadium before the game, and like bet the sports bet. I mean, 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, like if you wanted to bet on sports, there were like 3 places in the country you could do it. You had to go there physically, you had to fly to Vegas, go to a sports book, bet with someone to get a stub, and if you won, you had to go back to Vegas and cash that thing in. Like, and now you're seeing state by state, but like Massachusetts just approved sports betting a couple months ago with restrictions, things like that. So now we're sort of seeing this massive new universe of people that maybe didn't engage with us before. What do we do with that, both with sports betting as a revenue stream, but also about sports betting as an avenue to find new customers? Baseball has an opportunity where it's, the season is 6 months long, 7 months with the postseason. From pretty much July to September, it's the only major sport, sorry, apologies to the MLS, but of the 4 major sports in the US that's playing, right? Because basketball and hockey then and football hasn't started. It's also a series of discrete events, right? It's someone throws a pitch, something happens. 15 seconds later, someone throws a pitch and something happens. So you can, it sort of lends itself for gambling, and it's always on. There's games on every single night. There's literally outside the All-Star break, never a part during the season. So there's opportunity there for us to really kind of tap into that. So I think thinking a lot about what we do there is a big effort. And one other thing I'd mentioned is, so we are, as I mentioned earlier, like we're a Fenway Sports Group, right? So the Red Sox are part of that, as is Liverpool, and the Penguins, as is RFK, and we're hoping to expand that in the future. Part of our vision there is centralizing and streamlining some of our data analytics efforts, right? So does it make sense for each of those teams to have their own, tech stack, their own data structure, or do you start to see some synergies and opportunities for economies of scale? And I think as you're seeing more of these sort of, hedge fund, people like buying multiple teams and having these like cross-property sort of assets, are there more ways that we can sort of leverage data as almost like a conglomerate of teams and opportunities than as a series of discrete sort of like departments that are kind of handling these things? So I think that's super exciting, and I work closely with my counterparts at those teams, and we often think about ways that we can, if the Red Sox have done a fantastic customer segmentation, could we hand that to the Penguins and say, look, dump your customer data into this exact same model, and save yourself a month of work that we just did? So I think those things are really exciting as well.
Yeah, I think you touched upon it there in terms of working as part of a bigger group, and one of the perks of doing that, I guess, is to be able to bounce different ideas off each other and kind of work together in those ways to be able to help each other out, right? So I think that's a huge perk of working as part of the group that you're in. So, but I mean, the stuff that we talked about today, Jon, has been absolutely fascinating. So I'm so thankful that you've been able to do this. So, but my very last question before we finish off today. So what is the biggest takeaway that you would like the audience to take with them today after this episode?
Yeah, probably the biggest takeaway, I say this to a lot of people because I always find it funny, I grew up as a fan of sports. I'm a big sports fan, I went to a million games. I just sort of never thought about the fact that these are businesses too, that there's a whole team of people, that there are finance departments and sales departments, and there's an HR department and all these sorts of things. And so it's like funny, I often tell people sort of what I do, and they're like, oh, like, I guess I never really thought about that. The Red Sox have a whole, it's like, yeah, we put on 81 live events a year. We put 3 million people through the gates. And so I guess the biggest takeaway is, next time you're at a, your favorite team, a live sporting event, just sort of like think a little bit about everything that goes into that, because it is really remarkable. We have such an amazing, like our baseball ops team, our ballpark ops team, our grounds crew, just what goes into putting this thing on. It really is truly remarkable. And so, again, whether you're playing right field or you're in the accounting department, like there are a lot of people that support that. And I think that's been really humbling for me to sort of, I get, when I go to other sports now, I sort of go in and my brain can't get out of the sort of like, oh, wow, it's amazing that like that, oh, they ran a bunch of messages for people. Like someone had to do that. Like, was that manual? Was it automated? Like, how do they collect? There's all sorts of things that you sort of look at in a different light. So I'll even say, like, I was like driving down the highway recently, and there was one of those big signs, like with the digital signs. It's like, oh, it's like time to this exit, right? Because it's telling you if there's traffic or not. And I'm like, I wonder how that's populated. Like, is that automated? Is there like a Tableau report behind that? Is like someone sitting at a computer? Like, I'm so fat. Like, so I guess it's like it's the thing of like, there's a lot of obvious ways that data affects your life, but there's so many ways that it's not obvious how data affects your life. And I would encourage people just to think, as you go through your day-to-day, think about the ways that behind the scenes, these things are kind of happening. And I think that's always a great way to approach your own life as well. And you might find some things that you can kind of pull into your own orbit and use in your day-to-day as well.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Jon, thank you so much for being a part of this. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board with it. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for taking part.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Hope it's helpful.